Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode. So me and Taz were just chatting off air and we were talking about like weird like trends on TikTok at the moment, and we were talking about this trend that's going around at the moment called "We listen, we don't judge." So basically the idea is people, the ones that I've seen, like people stand in a line and everybody says we listen and we don't judge, and then somebody steps forward and like says something that like, you definitely want to judge them for, and then they sit back and everyone says we listen, we don't judge, and then like so on and so on. And anyway, I was just about to tell Taz this, but then I thought I'm just going to save it so you guys, the listeners, can hear it as well. But I actually watched one the other day, and one of them literally steps forward and he says, one time I was around my girlfriend's house and he had it in the toilet and it wouldn't flush, and he scooped it out with his hands. And I was like, nah, I'm judging. Like, I'm actually judging. And like that is now, ever since I've seen that, it's just living rent free in my head, because what are you actually doing? Like, what possesses you to do that?
What would he do with it after that? You scoop it out and put it where?
That's a good point. This is actually a really good point. Where did you put it? Down the sink?
Yeah. Oh. Like at that point, just like claim that you shit in the toilet and it's not flushing. Like,
yeah, like literally just go out and say like. But that's a really good point. Where did he put it? Like, I didn't even think about that when I watched it. That is such a good point.
Maybe he wrapped it up in toilet paper and took it home.
Mate, I actually can't deal with all of these like talks that we have on this podcast.
But if you had to do that trend, what do you think you would say?
I just feel like some people seriously overshare on the internet. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, some things just don't need to be seen on the internet, shared on the internet. Like, it's just, do you know what I mean? Like, not everything has to go online.
Yeah, I would really be exposing myself, I think, if I spoke about the two that I'm thinking of.
Well, speaking of internet trends, today we're going to be talking all about the origins of the internet. So let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the So Cultured podcast, hosted by Liv and Taz, exploring the world of science and tech, unfiltered.
This season, we're diving into the origins and taking you on a thrilling journey through the breakthroughs and untold stories that shape today's biggest scientific fields.
And of course, every episode brings the same mix of fun, fresh perspectives, and gossip, aka laboratory. From lab scandals to workplace drama, nothing is off limits.
This is So Cultured Season 4, The Origins.
We use the internet every day. It's how we work, play, and stay connected. But have you ever stopped to wonder, how the hell did the internet actually come about? Believe it or not, it all began with just two letters, L and O. That was the first ever message sent over what would become the internet, though it wasn't supposed to be. See, the system actually crashed before they could finish typing login. What followed was a journey full of unexpected twists, breakthroughs, and moments that redefined how we communicate forever. So long before the internet, people were already thinking about how to connect across long distances in ways that seemed impossible at the time. And Samuel Morse was one of these people. He was born in 1791 in Charlestown, Massachusetts. Morse initially trained as a painter and became well known for his portraits, and he even studied art in Europe. But his life took a sharp turn after a personal tragedy. So when Morse was working on a painting in Washington, D.C., he actually received a message that his wife had suddenly fallen ill and had passed away. But by the time the message actually reached him, it was unfortunately too late for him to return home in order to actually say goodbye to her. And it was this devastating experience that made him obsessed with the idea of faster communication. And from here, Morse invented the telegraph, a device that could send messages using electrical signals over wires. So it worked by creating bursts of electricity in patterns called Morse code, which are short and long signals that stood for letters and numbers. And for the first time, you could send news across countries almost instantly, completely changing how people communicated.
That's actually insane, because obviously you just said it was in like 1700s, like 1791 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's actually crazy that was invented like in the 1700s and we were still using it like in the height of the world wars. Do you know what I mean? In like
literally so
the
true.
1900s. And I feel like we say this on a lot of the episodes of this series of like how rapidly in the last century or the last 20 years even, or 50 years, things have accelerated in terms of like development, like technology development. And before that, it was literally so slow. But yeah, I never really thought about who invented it either. When you said Morse, like the name Morse, I was like, oh.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, actually, because it wasn't actually until the 1900s that kind of like the next big thing happened in relation to like the history of the internet. So in the early 1900s, Nikola Tesla took this idea even further. So he imagined a world where we actually wouldn't need any wires at all. And he believed that messages could be sent literally through the air using something called electromagnetic waves, which are invisible signals that travel through space, carrying energy from one place to another. So they're part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which includes things like radio waves, microwaves, and even visible light.
Okay, so I'm definitely not a physicist. So how do these waves work?
So electromagnetic waves, you can think of them like ripples in a pond. So like when you toss a pebble into the water, it creates these waves that kind of like spread outward. And with electromagnetic waves, the pebble is a vibrating electric charge, and the ripples are basically like energy which travels through space. And these waves can carry information like sounds or images by altering their frequency or amplitude, which basically changes how fast they vibrate or like how big the ripples are. And Tesla, like I said, he believed that we could use these waves to send messages wirelessly across vast distances. And he actually even started building the Wardenclyffe Tower, which is basically like a massive structure designed to transmit signals and power through the air. And the idea was that electromagnetic waves could travel around the Earth without needing wires and reaching people like on the other side of the globe.
That's so interesting because he's really not far off what actually happens today. I mean, does this tower still exist?
Unfortunately, they actually tore it down in 1917, but the land where it was kind of like built is actually still there, obviously. And in recent years, they've actually turned it into a museum, kind of honoring Nikola Tesla's work. So while the tower itself is gone, I guess like Tesla's vision kind of lives on in the technology that we use every day and like in this museum, right? And speaking of visionary projects, let's rewind to the 1960s when the Cold War was going on. This is kind of actually like where I think like the birth of the internet really started. So during this time, a single bomb could essentially wipe out an entire communication network, which would leave countries isolated and defenseless. And this was kind of like a terrifying reality that the US Department of Defense was trying to deal with. So essentially, they needed a system that was decentralized, which means that basically no single point of failure could take it all down. And that's when ARPANET was born, which is essentially the very first version of what we now call the internet. And ARPANET introduced a game-changing idea, which is called packet switching. Now, unlike Tesla's dream of using electromagnetic waves to send signals through the air, ARPANET actually wasn't wireless, so it relied on wired connections, like telephone lines, for example, to actually physically link computers across the country. And these wires were obviously like quite robust, but they had a critical vulnerability. So if one central connection was destroyed or went down, then the entire network would collapse.
Okay, so rewind. What exactly is packet switching? I've never heard of that before.
Okay, so basically when we did our solar system episode, I loved our little like women in STEM analogy. So we've got a women in STEM analogy to explain packet switching. Okay, so I want us to imagine for the listeners that Taz's birthday coming up. Is that her 30th birthday coming up?
So oh my gosh, no it's not.
And Taz really wants me. She thinks I have like the best fashion sense ever and she wants me to send her an outfit. So I'm going to send Taz a dress, shoes, a bag and some jewelry, the full works. But instead of packaging everything into one giant box, I'm going to send each item in its own adorable, sparkly little package. Now, maybe the shoes take one delivery route. So DPD are taking the shoes, the dress takes another route, and the jewelry might get there a little bit later because it spends more time in customs. But because each package has Taz's address on it, they all eventually are going to end up at her house. So once she gets all the packages, she can put the outfit together and she is ready to go. And that's kind of how packet switching works. So essentially, it just breaks big chunks of information, like a message or video, into smaller packets that travel separately. So again, they might take different paths, but they all get where they need to go and they're pieced back together perfectly. Now, this method wasn't just clever, it was actually revolutionary, and it didn't take long for ARPANET to put packet switching to the test. So on October 29th, 1969, the first ARPANET connection was made between UCLA and the Stanford Research Institute. Now, the plan was to send the word login, but as history often goes, things didn't go as planned. And the system actually crashed after the first two letters were sent, L and O. So the very first message sent on the internet was just LO.
Oh, that's savage. Imagine just being like, oh, for God's sake. We were like making a groundbreaking, or not discovery, but we were making groundbreaking research. And then we've just like fudged it up.
Couldn't even get through 5 letters.
LO. That
Hello.
is relatable. Rip.
I mean, yeah, if you're like Cockney English, like maybe it was just them saying hello, like hello.
Oh, yeah, good point.
But what's really amazing is actually how quickly ARPANET grew. So it wasn't just a military tool. Universities and research institutions actually all began starting to use it, and they began kind of like connecting to it. And it kind of like created a network where scientists could actually collaborate across long distances, which I think is so interesting. Like that was one of the first use cases for it. And as the internet expanded, people started working on ways to actually make it easier to use. And this is where Elizabeth Jake Fiendler comes in. So she was a pioneering computer scientist who managed the Network Information Center in the 1970s and 80s. So before the internet became user-friendly, the NIC was essentially the hub of ARPANET, and Fiendler and her team were responsible for actually keeping track of every single computer connected to the network.
How is that actually possible? Like, how do you keep track of every computer connected to one network? What does that actually mean?
I know, like this is actually really interesting. So ARPANET wasn't like the internet that we have today, where you just kind of like type in a website name. So every computer on the network had like a unique address. So it's kind of like a phone number. And Fiendler's team actually manually recorded and organized all of these addresses. So you can think of it like she was basically responsible for maintaining a massive phone book for the internet, making sure every connected machine had a name, address, and a way to communicate with others, which I think is so interesting that like initially it was all done like manually. That's literally crazy.
Yeah.
But Fiendler's team later, like obviously this just became way too much as more people started using the internet, right? So they developed the domain name system, or DNS. And this is the system that allows us to use website names instead of long, complicated numerical addresses. So if you've ever typed like www.example.com into a browser, you can thank Elizabeth and her team for actually making that possible.
That's actually insane. So she basically gave the internet its first directory almost.
Yeah, exactly. So without her and like her team, the early internet would have been like way harder to navigate. But so we've spoken about like ARPANET. So if ARPANET laid the foundation for the World Wide Web, it was Tim Berners-Lee who truly built the house. So in 1989, Berners-Lee was a computer scientist working at CERN, the European Research Lab. Back then, scientists at CERN were sharing massive amounts of data, as I'm sure you and like all of the listeners can relate to. But it was scattered across different systems. So imagine having to open a different app or program for like every single file or email. It was just like a huge mess. So Berners-Lee wanted to organize all of this information into one place and make it easy to access. And that's how he actually came up with the concept of the World Wide Web. So he built 3 key tools that made it possible. So the first one was HTML, which stands for hypertext markup language, which I'm sure we've all heard of, and some of our listeners actually probably work with every single day. And you can think of this as the blueprint that lets you create and format web pages. And then we have HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And this is essentially the set of rules that lets your browser talk to a web server, so you can like click a link and actually like go somewhere. And then finally, he also developed URLs, which stand for Uniform Resource Locators. And these are unique addresses for each web page, kind of like the internet's version of street names. Now, using these tools, Berners-Lee created the very first website in 1991. It was a simple text-based page explaining what the World Wide Web was and how to use it.
Okay, so I imagine the kind of websites that were up back then were nothing like today. So what did the first website actually look like?
Yeah, so it was just plain text and links. So it was like very minimalist. And it was actually called info.cern.ch. And visually, it was as basic as it gets. So there was no images, no colors, and definitely no flashy animations. But what made it groundbreaking is what it actually did.
Okay, so what did it actually do?
So it was basically like a guide. So it literally explained the World Wide Web and how people could use it. So it included instructions on how to create web pages using HTML. It included links to other early web pages and information about the software that you needed to actually access the web. And it even offered the ability to download the very first web browser, which was also created by Berners-Lee, so that other people could start browsing the small but growing web. But the real magic was through the hyperlinks. So for the first time, you could actually click on a word or a phrase and instantly be transported to a new page or document. So you know how like we'll Google something and then we just click and it takes us to like a different page. That was kind of like the first instance of that. So that was like the magic of it. And what I think is really cool is that a version of that first website is actually still preserved online. So I was actually looking at it earlier. So you can actually visit it and see what the birth of the web looked like, which I think is so cool because it's like literally stepping into a time capsule from the early 90s. So if you want to see what it looks like, you can actually go online and see what it looks like and like navigate it. And I just think that's so cool.
Yeah, that's crazy. And honestly, it just reminds me of like my childhood, these like really simple websites and like dial up and stuff like that. And like, it's so crazy to think that people today, like
don't know
children
that.
today, have no concept of that.
Oh my God, you're so old. As if you just said that.
Oh, hey. I'm a 90s baby. So Tim Berners-Lee basically created the internet as we know it today.
Yeah, exactly. I actually think one of the coolest things about it is that he like didn't patent it or like tried to make billions of money off of it. Like he was solely focused on making the World Wide Web like free for everyone to use. And that decision was really key to its explosive growth. So by 1993, there were just 26 websites in existence. And then 2 years later, there were like tens of thousands. And one really big breakthrough that helped the web actually take off was the launch of the Mosaic browser in 1993. So this was the first browser that made the web easy to use for everyday people. So it combined like text and images on the same page for the first time. So like imagine going from like a really dull text only screen to like a colorful clickable world. Like, you know, everyone must have absolutely loved it. So Mosaic really made the internet feel exciting and accessible, and it set the stage for browsers like Netscape and eventually Google Chrome and Firefox and all of these browsers that we use today. And this surge in accessibility also actually laid the groundwork for like businesses to go online as well. So by the mid 90s, companies like AOL, this is where we're going to really like show our age here, companies like AOL and Yahoo were making the internet a household necessity. So AOL became famous for its you've got mail notifications, and this is gonna like, I don't really remember this, but like I was reading about it and like when I looked at the things, like, so I'm intrigued if you're gonna know about this, but apparently they used to give out like free CDs that would like give you hours of dial-up internet. So like it would be like 10,000 hours of internet like on the CD. You used to get them in magazines. You used to like get them in the
Oh.
post. Do you remember them?
It doesn't ring a bell, but maybe if I looked it up, it would.
Yeah, like you got to see the CDs. Like they say AOL on them. But maybe some of the listeners.
That is like unlocking something in the deep-rooted part of my brain.
Yeah, literally. So maybe some of the listeners will remember it. I don't know. You have to let us know, guys, if you remember the AOL CDs. So yeah, that was AOL. And then also I mentioned Yahoo. So Yahoo was one of the first search engines to kind of like organize the chaos of the web. So they offered like email, your news, and like games all in one place. And also on AOL, they also introduced AIM chat rooms, which I guess were like the original group chats. Like you could log on and join a room and just talk to strangers about anything. And it's kind of given like Omegle. Do you know what I mean? Like that was the precursor to Omegle. But yeah, I don't know if you ever used these chat rooms, Taz. I didn't, because I think my parents would have like killed me, but I remember them.
No, I don't think I ever used chat rooms, but I definitely used like those online kind of games, and you would be talking to absolutely like random people, like Habbo Hotel and stuff.
Yeah, and there'd just always be like some creepy old men, like without a doubt.
Yeah, 100%.
Or like MySpace, Bebo was the worst for that.
Yeah.
I remember when my dad actually banned me from using Bebo, because he was like, I literally remember him saying to me like, there's a load of like perverts on there, like you can't be on there. And I was so upset, because I was like, no way. Like I actually love Bebo, but he banned me.
Oh, my friend Bill, like he's gonna not know where I've gone.
Literally, like some random sweaty old man in his mum's basement, like.
Oh.
Anyway, speaking of like quirky stories and things that shape the internet, have you ever heard of 𝗃𝘂𝗃𝘀𝗃?
Don't think so.
Okay, so Lena was a Swedish model whose image actually became iconic in the tech world, though not by her own choice. So back in 1973, researchers at the University of Southern California were working on a groundbreaking project. So they were trying to figure out how to turn physical photos into digital ones. And they actually needed like a test image for them to figure out how to do this, right? And for reasons we'll never quite know, / we know the reasons, they actually chose Lena's photo from the November 1972 centerfold of Playboy magazine.
Oh God, that's just classic, isn't it?
Yeah, literally. And at the time, Playboy wasn't just like a magazine, was it? It was like a cultural icon. Like it was so big and famous. Like I know that like if that was me back in that time, like, I would want to be a Playboy model. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I still want to be a Playboy model. I think that's fucking iconic. Like it
was a real cultural thing for sure.
Yeah. So obviously Lena's image was eye-catching because she is beautiful, and it had just the right balance of detail and contrast to test image compression algorithms. And so it actually became and so it actually became the standard for decades, helping to shape digital imaging as we know it, including the creation of the JPEG format.
Oh God. I don't know how I feel about this. I feel very conflicted because I'm like, oh yeah, of course it was. Of course it had like the right balance of detail and contrast. And it's just like, I'm sure there's 1,000 other images that have that right balance as well. But
literally,
that's I kind of like that as a story. Like it adds something. And I feel like in this series, we've definitely found that a lot. There's really like interesting stories behind a lot of these sort of discoveries. So did she actually know about it?
So not at first. So for years, like her image was scanned, studied, shared in labs and like even classrooms without her knowledge. So she literally had no idea. And by the time she found out, her photo had already become a fixture in tech. It appeared in like textbooks, research papers, conferences, and she was even nicknamed the first lady of the internet. But here's the thing, Lena didn't sign up to be the face of digital imaging forever. Like, yes, she was a Playboy model and she was like in Playboy, but she didn't sign up to this. Do you know what I mean? And actually recently done a documentary called Losing Lena, where she kind of spoke about how strange it felt to actually see her image used for so long, especially obviously like in a male dominated industry where her photo kind of like may have unintentionally alienated women, I guess. And now Lena herself is actually asking the world to like let her image retire. So she's actually teamed up with organizations like Code Like a Girl to encourage researchers to use like new, more inclusive test images. And in her words, she said, "I retired from modeling long ago. It's time I retired from tech too." And I love that.
Yeah. See, this is why I'm conflicted about the image, you know, like there's a reason why she was used as the first image, like let's face it. And secondly, where give her check. Do you know what I mean? Like she's been used as the face of tech for so long. Send her check, please, because it's just so annoying. This actually reminds me of Henrietta Lacks, who was basically the first kind of like immortalized cells, the HeLa cells, were taken from Henrietta Lacks. I think it may have been like a cervical tumor or something like that, some kind of tumor after she passed away. And they like laid the foundations for the first immortalized cells. But like her family and Henrietta Lacks obviously didn't give consent to this. And her family have never seen like any monetary value from
oh my God,
these cells, and they're like still like widely used in science today. And it just reminds me of that. It's like not the same scenario at all, but like
kind of is.
It's just another situation where like a woman is kind of being taken advantage, and she's not seen like any benefit from that at all. Monetary wise, that is crazy. Or her family.
Yeah, it literally is crazy. And like, I think it is totally related because her image ultimately, like helped test all these algorithms and even lead to the creation of JPEG. Like, that's crazy. But I guess like thinking more deeply about it, Lena's story and like Henrietta's story, like, they're not just, well, Lena's story isn't just about one photo, right? It's kind of a reminder of how small decisions in tech or science can have like lasting impacts. And I think this is really interesting as we move forward into like this world shaped by AI. Like, you know, we spoke about this on the AI episode, and also like the metaverse as well. So I guess this is like Lena's documentary is kind of like a call to make the tech industry more thoughtful, inclusive, and respectful of everyone who interacts with it. And that kind of brings us to today. So the internet isn't just something that we log on to anymore. It's like everywhere, and it's woven into almost every single part of our daily lives. So like you and me, we're on this call right now, like whoever's listening, they're using the internet to listen to us somehow. So the internet is in our pockets, it's on our wrists, and it's even running in the background of our homes. So from the smartphone in your hand to the smart thermostat adjusting your room temperature, this is the era of like constant connectivity. But of course, all of this convenience comes with a price. So if we take privacy, for example, every single time you click, and this is not a conspiracy theory, like this is real life. Every time you click, scroll, or search, you are leaving a digital footprint. And companies like Google, Meta, and Amazon, like they collect data on nearly everything you do, like what you buy, how long you watch a video, even how fast you scroll past on an ad. And this data really fuels everything from targeted ads to the algorithms that shape the content that you see online.
I'm kind of smiling because like obviously that's kind of like a harrowing comment, but it just reminds me of you know those like TikToks that you see of people who like get their like boyfriend's phone and they're like engagement ring. Oh my God. I'm like, oh, see, that's the only one benefit. But
what would you say on Kieran's phone?
Engagement ring. No, I'm joking. It's coming up to 7 years,
like pole boots. Yeah, to be fair, you're due. You are due.
Yeah, I'm getting old as well. But anyway, I don't want to put pressure on you, Kieran. If you're listening, don't worry. But I think it's kind of scary as well because they're like, I will literally search one thing and then I'll get so many targeted ads for it.
It's called predictive analytics, actually. And like obviously it can be useful in some like instances, like suggesting songs that you love. Like I always use it on the way home. Like when I'm driving, like I put on my Spotify playlist and like I get new songs and I love it for that. But also like it raises some serious privacy concerns because like who owns that data and like how is it being used, who's using it, and like can you ever really delete it? Do you know what I mean? And that's just like one challenge. So let's talk about the metaverse, this big buzzy concept that everyone's like really hyped about. Well, I feel like it was really hyped up like about a year ago, and then it's kind of just gone a bit dead. But for anyone who doesn't know what the metaverse is, it's basically a fully immersive virtual world where you can hang out, work, and play. So you basically put on a VR headset and then you just like go into the metaverse, and you can just, so like me and Taz could both put on VR headsets and then go into the metaverse, and then like we could hang out together, like, and it would feel like real life, but obviously it's not. They're still obviously developing it, and I'm just like so intrigued as to like what that's going to grow into. And yeah, everyone's saying it's going to come like the future of the internet, right? And I'm just so interested in how that's all going to play out.
Yeah, I think these are the sorts of things that make it more kind of scary for me, in my opinion. Like, I sometimes feel like we all just need to get out and touch grass because, like, this is, I think this is like, it's scary where virtual reality is gonna like potentially advance more and more. But like at the moment, I guess it kind of feels like Sims, but with real money, whereas not like an actual reality, if that makes sense. My question is, will we ever unplug or like disconnect from the internet? Because I can't see that happening personally.
Yeah, I guess that is the $1 million question. And speaking of the future, there's one more thing I want to talk about, which is Google's new quantum chip. And like, if you're into tech and you follow tech news, like you would have heard about this, but it's called Sycamore X. So quantum computing is one of the most exciting developments in tech. And unlike traditional computers, which process one bit of information at a time, so like ones and zeros, quantum computers can process millions of possibilities simultaneously. So this means that the internet and computing in general could become exponentially faster and smarter. So think about solving problems in seconds that would take today's supercomputers years to do. So Google's Sycamore X chip recently achieved what is called quantum supremacy by performing a calculation in just a few seconds that would actually take traditional computers over 47 years. So basically, like, this new chip is just like you can't even comprehend like how fast and this chip is. Like, it's just insane. And a lot of people are saying that this chip and quantum computing in general could be the future of the internet. It could revolutionize fields like medicine, climate science, and obviously AI. But it also actually poses a massive challenge to cybersecurity, which I think is really interesting. So most of our online data, banking info, passwords, all of our private messages, for example, they're all protected by what's known as encryption. And people are saying that quantum computers and, like, for example, this chip could actually break this encryption in a heartbeat. So I think it's super exciting, the field of like quantum computing and like these new chips, but also super scary as well. And I just think it's really interesting. So if you're interested in the future of the internet and where it could potentially go, I definitely recommend reading about quantum computing and this new Sycamore X chip from Google, because it's all just super interesting. And maybe we can do an episode on it in the future, because I would love to learn a little bit more about quantum computing as well. And yeah, so let us know if you want an episode on that. But with that, that kind of rounds off the origins of the internet and kind of like a background on the history of the internet.
Yeah, thanks so much, Liv. That was so interesting, and like things I've never even really considered before. The fact that it probably originated from like Morse code, like that's crazy to think.
Yeah, it's literally so cool. But for now, it is time to get on to the laboratory section of today's episode. So let's get into it.
Okay, so before we get into today's laboratory, it is obviously the last episode of the season, and I just think that's crazy because every time we finish the season, I'm just like, it's gone so quickly.
So quick.
And I'm like, how are we going to level up for next season again?
Mate, I'm not worried at all. I know our topic for next season and we are leveling up. Like every season, I feel like that I'm just more and more excited for the topic. I'm not worried at all.
Okay, I'm glad you have confidence in us, Lynn.
So yeah, we just want to say thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in to this season. We really hope that you guys enjoyed it and enjoyed learning all about these origin stories. We would absolutely love to hear your feedback on what you're thinking of the new video episodes. If there's anything you want us to change about the podcast, if there's anything that you're loving about the podcast, please definitely send us a DM and give us some feedback. You can also give us a rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, or you can drop a comment if you're listening to us on YouTube. Now, just thinking ahead to season 5. Season 5 will be coming in early to mid-March. So make sure that you're following us on Instagram and TikTok if you guys want to stay up to date with, number one, what the topic will be, because we always reveal what the topic will be for the new season roughly like 2 weeks before it comes out. So stay tuned for that, like end of Feb towards early March, we'll be sharing that. And we will also give you a specific date for when the first episode of season 5 will be coming out. But yes, you can expect us back in around early to mid-March.
If you would like to be involved in season 5 laboratory time, then head to the anonymous link in our description. And it is completely anonymous. We do not know who you are when we see your tea. So go wild. Or if it's just like general agony aunt type of questions, then send those in as well. So we always are looking for submissions there and your tea to share with us. So that leads me on to today's laboratory, which isn't like specific personal tea, but I just thought it was quite funny for the last episode of the season. And it begins with 4 monkeys escaped from the lab. Now, I live in South Carolina and I found out today that there is a laboratory facility on the coast that had 40 monkeys escape from it. Apparently, this isn't the first time it has happened, and they do some sort of neurological research on these monkeys. But it immediately reminded me about the Planet of the Apes podcast episode and kind of scared me. I just thought it was kind of crazy that 40 monkeys have escaped, and this actually isn't the first time. Now, when the listener sent this in, I actually went online to maybe find out a bit more information, and this happened fairly recently. It only happened in November, like early November, I think,
of
2024. So like that was like very recently. And yeah, it said that 43 rhesus macaques, which are a type of monkey, escaped from this facility. And I think
I shouldn't laugh.
At the time of this article was written, 8 monkeys were still at large. So I don't know if they were actually recovered, but surely they must have
Imagine
been.
they're still out there.
I know.
I want to know what kind of like, so she says like, wait, did they say there was like neurological research going on, or did I make that up? They're doing neurological research on these monkeys.
The listener said it was neurological research, but yeah, when I looked at the article, it just gave me the name of the lab. I don't actually know what they do, so I'm just
can we Google it? Can we find? But if we know the name of the lab, can we find out? Because I feel like that's a key piece of information, you know, because that could make or break this story.
Yeah, so I just looked it up, and it looks like it's like a primate research center. So it's where they kind of house loads of monkeys for research, and then they like facilitate research on behalf of people who want like animal or in vivo experiments.
Oh my God. I totally know what the listener means about like, this is giving Planet of the Apes, like 100%. But like, I want to know how they got out. Like, how did they get out?
So it said on the article that a caretaker left the door open.
Nah, that's so peak. Imagine being that caretaker. No, because what would you actually do? Like, imagine how embarrassing that would be. Like, everybody at work like knows that you were the reason that like 40 monkeys got out. That is embarrassing. I can't lie.
Yeah, I know. And also, these animals are not cheap. Like, it's not just standard monkeys that's like like in a zoo, these are research facility animals, so they are so much more expensive than like just a standard zoo animal. So I don't even know what I would do if I was in that position. But I also read on the article that it's happened multiple times, like happened in 2016 and 2014 as
It's the
well.
same caregiver. He's not been by a jet. He just keeps on letting them out. Imagine.
I know. And they also
They're
said
like,
that they
Gavin
enticed them
again.
back with, oh, Gavin.
Also, like rhesus macaques, because for any of the listeners who don't know, I used to work in a zoo, and I used to always work in this one shop, and it was next to, I'm pretty sure it was next to a macaque enclosure, and I'm pretty sure that they are like very aggressive monkeys. Like I swear. So like it's not even that you've just let out like some cute. I think most monkeys are quite aggressive, but
Yeah.
were they just running around South Carolina, just like beating everybody up? They're really aggressive, honestly.
Yeah, if you're listening and you don't know what rhesus macaques are, if you've ever seen like those TikToks of people being attacked by monkeys in like
Oh, in
Ubud
Bali.
or Bali or like other
Yeah.
places in Asia, those are macaques. Like they are
Mm-hmm.
terrifying, and like they will like bare their teeth at you. They will like steal your stuff and like have to
Mm-hmm.
be bribed to give it back. I actually read on the article that was talking about the escape that they managed to entice them back in with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Me.
Funny because like that is literally what they do in Bali. Like when monkey like steals someone's glasses or something, they only do that so that they can get like bribed
Give
with
food.
food back.
Oh my
So that is
God. What
one
a
of the only
mood.
reasons why they like steal your stuff. One, obviously to look for food in your bag, but like if they steal like a personal item and don't give it back, it's because they've almost been trained to do that because they know that they will get food in return for it. So I just thought that's quite interesting. But yeah, that's so scary. Like I've been to Bali before,
Mm-hmm.
and also in Thailand they're also
Mm-hmm.
like there's like a monkey beach, and so many people get attacked by the monkeys on the monkey
You know what?
beach.
And they're clever in Thailand, right? Because me and my boyfriend went to Thailand like March last year, and we went to this like hotel, and it was a beautiful hotel. So it was like these kind of like villas around this lake, and they literally, there was signs everywhere saying don't feed the monkeys, don't interact with the monkeys, because they literally would come on your balcony. They would, so I and they said don't leave stuff outside like on your balcony. And like I literally had this one bikini that I absolutely loved, like, you know, that bikini that just looks bomb on
Oh,
you? Like, it looks so good on you.
yeah.
Like, it is the perfect bikini for you. I left it to dry on the balcony, and I went out in the morning. I was like, where's my bikini? Like, literally, where's my bikini? Tell me why I literally see it in the lake. But it was like at the bottom. And I was like, no, because it had like beads on it. And it literally went to the bottom. And I was like, it's the fucking monkeys. I know
Oh,
it. And they were just such little shits. Like, I literally remember we were like laying in bed, and like we literally looked up. There's this monkey literally about to open our door. Like, I'm not even joking, they're so intelligent. It was like up on its two legs, like literally opening the door, and like Gage had to run up and like hold the door shut, because I think they kept coming in. Like, the workers kept telling us that they kept going into people's room, and like they knew exactly where like the mini bars were and the fridges, and they would like open the fridge to like
oh,
get food and stuff. But do you know what's really funny? It's like earlier when you were saying about like you wouldn't know what to do when like an animal escapes. So when I worked at the zoo, like obviously we all got taught like what to do during like animal escapes, and it was literally the
yeah.
most useless thing ever. But I was so petrified every single day when I was like at the zoo of an animal getting out, because my job was, I was basically like supervisor of like all the different shops around the zoo. And
Mm.
so I would be like, my job like, at the end of the day was to like walk around the zoo and like close up all of the shops. So I would be walking around the zoo and it would be completely empty. And the most petrifying thing ever was walking past the lion enclosure, because when everybody
Oh
leaves, they
my
get really
gosh.
vocal. So they would just be roaring constantly, and they would follow you like from one end, because it was like this really like long path going past their enclosure that you had to walk past, and the lion would literally follow you, and it was the most petrifying thing ever. But what they taught us is that if an animal gets out, what you have to do is get as many customers in the like building as possible, lock the door. And I'm like, yeah, great, what is locking a glass door gonna do if a lion or a chimp gets out? Like, it's literally not saving me at all. And then to hide under something. That was literally what they taught us. And I was like, great. But imagine if you live near South Carolina, you just sat there eating your dinner, and then all of a sudden there's just like a macaque just trying to open your
You'd
door
be
or
like,
something.
what on earth?
Oh, but that's just funny. Like, I think it's funny because it's happened like so many times. Like, how are you guys still having all these monkeys escape? Like, I feel like, is that why they said it's given Planet of the Apes? Because the monkeys are like super smart and they keep figuring out how to get out. Because like, how are you not figuring out how to keep them in at this point?
Well, I think it's also because, like, obviously they're research animals and, like, that kind of relates to Planet of the Apes. Also, the article that I read related it to Planet of the Apes as well. And I looked at some of the research that they do there. They do vaccine testing, I think is probably the main one. So that really is kind of like Planet of the Apes because they used that virus thing, didn't they?
Literally. What would you do if you let all the like monkeys out? Like, you're Gavin the caretaker, and like you're there after like it's like, you know, after hours, and somehow you accidentally like let them out. Like, would you confess, or would you be like, oh, I don't know how it happened? Like, what would you do?
I would 100% confess. Like, these are dangerous monkeys. I don't want someone to like get like so hurt from, I don't know. I think you'd have to like alert someone like straight away because there's no way you're getting them back in the
No, but what if they got out and then you call someone, you're like, oh yeah, they've got out. Like, my point is, would you say, oh, I left the door open, or would you be like, oh my god, I don't know how they got out? Bearing in mind, it sounds like it's not Gavin's first time. This is not his first rodeo.
If it's the same caretaker, yeah, that is embarrassing for Gavin. I don't know. I'll probably be like, oh my god, like maybe I left the door open or something, but I didn't think I did, or something like that. But like realistically, you probably wouldn't know if you 100% left the door open because like obviously that's not what you're supposed to do.
And normally they have 2 sets of doors. So at the zoo, they used to have checkpoints. You'd go through one door, you'd have to wait for it to lock before the other one could even open, and it was like a whole system. So like, I'm so intrigued as to how they keep getting out. Like, just the worst security ever. I mean, what does that say about their science? You know, they can't even have good security. Anyway, that rounds off today's laboratory section, and with that it rounds off the whole of season 4. So once again, we just want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to season 4, whether you've been listening, whether you've been watching, whatever it is. And don't forget that we will see you guys back for season 5 in early to mid-March, and make sure you're following us on socials so that you get to see the spoilers for what season 5 theme is going to be. So with that, we will see you guys in a few weeks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.